Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with two long lost cousins. And at one point in time, we lived about 5 blocks away from each other and never knew it. So, welcome, Linda. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Jean.
And hi, Jean. And you're not too far away from me right now, so that's good.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Nice to be here. Thanks for having us, Bob.
Well, it's great to have you guys. Um, so, for the audience, Linda and Jean and I never knew each other, and we met for the first time. It was about a year ago, April, when they came by the house and we exchanged stories. And Linda and Jean brought some great artifacts. So, Linda, my first question is going to be for you: is why and when did you start researching our common family and also the rest of your family?
Oh, you gave me chills. But that's a big question. I'll try to condense it for purposes of this discussion because I think we want Jean to say something too. But I think that if talking to our side of the family, I can't think of two better people. Of course, I would include myself and my cousin, right? I mean, no, honestly, Jean and I, we come from a different space than the rest of our cousins. I'll give him a chance in a minute. I think he will agree 100% with what I'm saying there. We have a foot in the old world and we have a foot in the new world. And with that, came a sense of responsibility, but it also came a familiar way, an understanding, and some of the inner thoughts of those that really came from Italy. My cousin can talk on about, he lived with my grandmother and grandfather. I lived next door to my Aunt Rose, my grandfather's sister, and the people that follow from Italy. And so I spent a lot of my days there, and my weekends I spent every weekend with Jean. So, but Jean and I were the only two to get that. And when we got that, we also got stories. I got the girl stories. He got the boy stories. He could tell you all about Sigiano. I could tell you all about Maria Pagamo. Those didn't pass because in her mind, we had our little rolls and our boxes and the things we needed to know. Like she opened her kitchen to me when I got married. That was like, okay, now you got to learn how to cook. But so I started way back when I was a kid, and and why how I got to the Italian family was easy because it was with the death of my father. I found all those pictures, and I had to put names on them. And I thought, what a better way to honor my father and my family than to do this. So that was the first tree that I printed. But with you, that was of course the amazing breakthrough that really brought together all kinds of new genealogy and old genealogy and people next door and around the corner and deeds on off. We can go on and on. But it started with the story about Maria Pagamo that I wouldn't give up. My grandmother only told me, and that her grandmother was a countess. That was it. Nobody believed me. And so I started 30 years ago and stuck to it. 30 years! But that's when there was nothing, what was I doing? I was reading books. I was reading books and learning how to do it. That was really what I did. And then I did my mother's stuff, which is American.
So Jean, one of the things that obviously neither one of us knew was how close we were. And I think the most intriguing thing about our relationship is that my first cousin Nancy and your mom were like very, very close friends. So when did you start and putting all this together?
Interesting question, Bob. It depends on what everything entails. I mean, I think putting things together as it relates to yourself and your side of the family existed very comfortably, very lovingly for as long as I can remember since I was a little boy. But it didn't include everyone in that side. It only included a few ambassadors, if you will. including, the 4 or 5 blocks away stuff. I mean, I know exactly where that was. I know, Louise and Emily and everybody, all these folks. I mean, these were very integral parts of my familial experience and group. And it was very nice. And it was a wonderful thing to belong to. It was a beautiful, embracing fit, and it became a sense of almost security in a way. You actually had a membership in a wonderful and loving society, and so that's where it started. Uh, you know, Echoing Linda's comments, I heard about my grandmother. Well, actually, my great grandmother from my grandmother, her mother. I heard about her mom from my grandmother. And now, without belaboring the point, I was in large measure, I said, I lived with them. I was largely raised by them, my grandparents, my grandmother, my grandfather, because of my mother's illness. She had a cardiac condition from birth, and then she got another one later, and so on. So she was there. She was there, a fair amount, but she was also absent a lot. Or even when she was there, she was resting, shall we say. My father was a wonderful human being, probably the loveliest and most compassionate human being I've ever known. Beautiful man, but he worked a lot, and some of it included travel. So my grandparents that lived in the same house, upstairs, downstairs, mother-daughter thing, were thankfully around, available, and willing to take on, in essence, their fifth child, meaning me. They didn't have to do that. And I just took it for granted, of course, because it's grandma and grandpa. Well, grandma and grandpa turned out to be pretty special. And like Linda says, with Aunt Rose, even Sam to an extent, her husband, these earlier ancestral, elderly, Italian something caregivers that were the epitome of unconditional love deluxe made all the difference in who both of us became. Comfortable in our own skin, enjoying life, good to others, the ability to share and to give, especially my cousin Linda. She's the most generous and thoughtful person I know. And all that came around and came around. But when I listened to my grandmother's stories about her mom, it was a missing big hole in her heart. She never knew her mom. Her mom died, we think, on the way back from, because my grandmother was born in New York City, and they took her back to Italy when she was roughly about a year and a half or 2 years old, something in that range. They took her back on a boat to be raised in Italy. My great grandfather did not want his daughter raised in America. He wanted her raised Italian in Italy. Hence the return to it was their first child, and so they did. And somewhere, somehow, we believe that my great grandmother passed away, we think, on the boat. Now, again, whose story is what? The story I got was that she died of an infection, basically sepsis, from mastitis, from breastfeeding her little daughter. And on a boat, in the middle of the ocean, and, whatever, 1910 or something about that. But she was born in '08. So it was roughly around that time. Linda would know the exact date, I'm sure. But theoretically, that's what happened. And we don't know where she is. We don't know where she's buried. We have no record. We don't know. So this is part of the yearning and burning desire to get to the bottom of this mystery. And there's no greater Sherlock Holmes on the planet than my cousin. With doggedness and devotion and resources and everything else, she's made it, her second life's work in a sense. But we don't know. But I remember my grandmother telling me as a kid, this is all kid stuff, you don't have a filter. You don't have a computer in your brain yet to process. You're just one big emotion and some defense, but mostly emotion. And she would tell me with great fervor, great, great emotional power, that she really, really missed this connection, because where she went back to in Italy eventually, she wound up being uh, the stepchild, if you will, because her father remarried fairly quickly, had 3 children. She became Cinderella, literally, and was physically abused by her new stepmom because she resembled the first wife. That's the story. She was physically beaten. And her three half siblings were given, the keys to the kingdom, and she was made to mop the floor and stay in the dark. She was nearly blind. She was legally blind in one eye her entire life because of the beating she took and the things that she was told that if she opens her mouth to her father when he came back from his world tours around, because he was, at least at some point, we think, involved with Enrico Caruso, the operatic tenor in those days, in some way, that if she said anything to him, who she really adored, as you would anticipate from this dynamic, she would get it even worse. So shut up. And it was a terrible thing. So she missed her mommy. And she would dream about her mother for years. And these dreams were absolutely delightful to her. They were visits. They were colloquial. They were conversational. And she would come, and because it was me and her a lot. My grandfather went off to work, same thing, and it was me and her a lot. And she would tell me with great eagerness and happiness and all kinds of stuff, effervescence, about her dream about her mom, who came into her bedroom and sat on her bed as a glowing figure and talked about the most basic things that you could talk about: childcare, cooking, laundry, just house stuff. And she would have this back and forth with her mommy sitting on the bed. And then the next day, she would come and tell me with all kinds of excitement and so forth and so forth. And I would hear all this stuff. And then they stopped abruptly, and she was devastated. They stopped for years and years and years. They just stopped. And she was very, very upset, but you don't control what you dream. They did come back. I'll spare you that long story, but they did come back many years later. And it's an interesting thing because the timing of when they came back coincided with some other interesting things. There are things in our family that are a little hard to explain. They verge on a little bit of mystical and spiritual, but most definitely familial. Anyway, but Linda and I enjoy the fact that we both have this heritage, this connection to our grandparents or great aunts or whoever, that generation, in some close proximity. And she and I grew up as brother and sister, and we would plan, even plot stuff together as little kids to try to, get to figure out where they hid the Christmas presents in advance. I mean, all kinds of silly stuff.
So, so let me stop you there for a second, Gene. Two things. The first thing is that kind of leads me to believe why your grandmother had such a deep connection to my grandmother, who would have been, I believe, her second cousin. And that whole family tie, because that, in essence, that was her family based on the other story that you told me.
Absolutely. They were responsible in large measure of getting her back to America. Yes, yes. Linda. I'll sign off at the moment. Let Linda explain that one.
Oh, no, sure, Gene. Well, this is so. This is kind of the dynamic. The Sicilian side was living in one part, and I was on that side. Gene was raised by grandma and grandpa, but I spent all my time there. And even though there were other grandkids, there were not other grandkids at grandma's house. It was Gene and I, Prince and Princess. Sorry, that's the way it was. Am I not? He could just say, I mean, it's true. And we were told things, we were treated differently. We are not that different in age from our next cousin. There's what, 6 months between him and Gene. He's not even part of any of this. Nothing. We were treated differently. All the clothes that you see me in were all made by the Sicilian side. My grandmother would never do anything like that, right? She was never, I mean, she didn't come from that class of people. Never. But all my clothes in every picture of me when I'm a kid were made by my Aunt Rose and my Aunt Teresa. Everything. Handmade, because that's what they were, seamstresses. But it's fun. Now, let me get to your question again, Bob. I twisted off. Ask it again, so I'd be sure to answer it and turn it back over to you all.
No, that whole connection.
I knew Georgina, your grandmother. That's who I knew. But and I knew, some of these other people, the Di Marias, and I kind of got an idea of all of that. But it really came together with you. I mean, I knew that was right. And if I could try to figure that, try to get that, and you were so generous early on, and Gene doesn't know this. I don't know if he does, but the first connection that we had typing in Ancestry.com was while I was at his house in Maine, early in the morning. I was typing Bob and saying, "Hey, you're my cousin. I think you really are." Yeah, he doesn't know that, but that's how we got connected. And because I always had an interest in it since the 70s, since I read Roots, I knew I was doing this. So I spent all my time reading Italian history. I spent all my time reading Roman history. I started building trees. I built a Roman family tree because that one I could do, because I could read books, find names, build trees. If you go out to my ancestry, you'll see there's one for Augustus. There's a whole family tree out there. I got it all. But that's how I kind of taught myself in preparation, and I did it on paper. I did it in preparation for the time that I'd get the chance to get the documents from Italy. And in the meantime, as Grandma was getting older and Jean was in school, I was still here. I was going to see her every day because she was alone. And I'd ask her questions and I'd start taking notes.
Yeah, and I think, and just another point to what Gene was saying was that whole spirituality thing. I hear that from so many people, that there's a force that drives people like us to find this out.
Let me tell you. See, look at my skin again, and here on my arm. When I think of going to Italy, my heart swells. When I'm in, I don't care what my DNA says. And I keep trying to tell that to my cousin's daughter, who I took over to Italy, because she just wants to be Italian so much she hates that her father's English. It just kills her. And I said, listen to me. You are what you culturally are. You are what you believe you are. I said, you met when I took you to Italy, you met black men. Are they Italian? They lived their whole life in Italy. Are they Italian? Or are they African? You don't know, because you don't know how they culturally live. You know where they live. So I said, separate those two things. Those are important separations. You're as Italian as I am because it's in your soul. I don't care what your blood says. The blood is interesting if you do genealogy, but it doesn't make you who you are. It's my grandmother. It's my grandfather. It's your grandmother. It's all those people that made me who I am. And I couldn't think of honoring them in any other way than memorializing them in things like history books and a cookbook. When you think about something to join an entire family, been here 100 years, what is one thing we can all agree on? Food.
So, Gene, I want to ask you a question. Now, you lived in Italy. You went to school in Italy, I believe. Did you know at that time any of these connections? Did you try to find anything while you were there, or while you were? I know you were busy in school, but did any of this cross your mind when you were a kid to look into this?
When I was a kid, no. Like I said, you take a lot for granted. Uh, no, it was all part of the tapestry of who was what, and we had family from all over the place. The people in Brooklyn, people in New Jersey, people in Queens, people whatever. People in Michigan, for God's sakes. And they would all come. They would all come because my grandparents were, they weren't patriarchal or matriarchal in the the formal sense of the word, but they were a lovely couple that people wanted to come and visit and see. Plus, it was what they kind of did. My grandmother had friends. Emily was one of her dearest. Linda mentioned Aunt Teresa, one of her best pals. She had a cousin, not even through marriage, Rose in Brooklyn. she had her thing. So it did not occur to me to explore that. I enjoyed it all. I enjoyed it. Well, I didn't enjoy Rosie so much. Rosie in Brooklyn used to grab my cheek and give it the old, oh, how big you got routine. I didn't like that a lot. But whatever. But they were all delightful people, all loving, gracious, generous, whatever. Terrific stuff. Terrific stuff. We even had an Uncle Toto. Who's got, you can't be real without an Uncle Toto, so we had one of those. When I went to Italy for medical school, the thought occurred eventually once I figured out where up was. You get some ideas, and at one point I did. I went down to Sicily to visit or to find really my grandfather's Sicilian, obviously grandfather's sister, his oldest sister. Concetta, and that's a long story. I won't go into the whole thing, but I did. I went down there. I did find her. It was a wonderful, wonderful, probably one of the top 10 memories of my life, will be until I'm gone, of actually finding and visiting with Concetta in her home, which is where my grandfather and Aunt Rose were born and raised until they came to America. And she came here with them. There was three of them. They came together. And they sent Concetta back after several weeks on Ellis Island alone, cruelly, in my opinion, because she was deemed to be illiterate. And she was probably close to that, I'm guessing, because she was the eldest. Their father had passed away. She needed to go to work early as a kid to make money to support the family. So how far in education she got, I don't know. But that was the rationale, to separate the poor thing who had made the sea journey and did everything everybody else did. And they sent her back, and she went somehow by herself, got back to Sicily, and went back to her home, the only home she ever knew. She did get married, and sadly, like her dad, her husband died young. She had no children. And I went and I found her, and it was delightful. And she was 90, I think she was 90 or 92, one or the other, when I found her. And she was great. She was spry. She was engaging. She was funny. Once she figured out who is this guy, this tall, skinny, little American-looking thing, and once she figured out I was her brother's grandson, in particular, first grandson, that was it. That was it. She jumped out of the bed, grabbed me around the neck, and pulled me into the bed and gummed me to death because she figured out it was really hysterical. But she was delightful. But after that, my grandmother on the other Napolitan side, actually just outside of Pompeii. She's from a little town called Scafati, just outside Pompeii, but it's in the Napoli area. She had asked me to go and find her folks, which I was willing to do. I never did, and I was happy to do it. I mean, this is all great stuff to me, but time is difficult when you're in school. But I was going to do it until it got a little so-so, because she hadn't spoken to her step siblings for 40 years or more. And then there was an earthquake in Naples, and she thought it was nice to call them and see how whatever that things were going, and they kind of got friendly again and blah, blah, blah. So she wanted me to go down and check them out. But she had sent them pictures of me and stories that I'm in Rome and this and that, and they sent back letters and pictures of the young ladies of the family that they wanted me to meet. And I went, wait a minute, hold it. I somehow feel a shotgun coming. So I never went. I regret that. But I never actually went down to see them.
I just have to say this. I got to laugh because I have all this information. Because when cleaning out the house, I went through all the drawers. The one thing is, I went through everything. I took all the paper, every picture, everything. Just put it in a bag. I'll figure it out when I get it home. Because we had to get out. My uncle wanted us out of the house in a week. It was like that wouldn't happen. But anyway, I took all that. But what I have been doing, that's really with this next version. And see, I've got all these versions, books I got to do. But I promise this. I really want to do this while my two Sicilian aunts are still alive. I want to do an update on the Sicilian family because I've learned so much about the Sicilians. One being is that when I was in Naples, let me just say, when I was in Naples, which I absolutely fell in love, I fell in love with that whole B&B idea in Naples. I absolutely love it. It was fabulous. I had such a great time. I made friends. And talking to them, the guy says to me, "We don't understand you Americans. All this interest in genealogy and ancestors. In Italy, everybody's a cousin. And you want to know what? I know in Sicily and Naples, everybody is a cousin. I'm walking up and down the streets and I'm saying, these all look like my people, you know? I mean, and then I do the family tree, and everybody on this list that they're coming from Sicily, I think they're coming alone, these 3 people from Sicily. Bullshit. There's like 3 pages from Sarah de Falco where they're all cousins. Everybody's marrying each other. And when he brought up Conchetta's husband was married to another cousin. And then she died. And he was free when she got back. So, hey, you know, he died, no 6 months, not 6 months between them were married. But now I know all these names. It just is, I'm going, you know, my cousins here. It was like my Uncle Vito was like, there was a secret about Aunt Rose and Uncle Sal being first cousins. Honey, look at the tree. We are married and intermarried and married again. I mean, we are all cousins. It was such a trip. But when I look at the letter, the thing when you get to the letters too, the other thing that we have is we have peasants, right? We have a family of peasants. And you look at pictures of my grandmother, even when she was getting married, every picture of my grandmother with everybody else around her, you pick her out when she's among everybody else. There was the way she sat, the way she walked, the way she talked, the way she looked. She had a refinement about her, whether she was raised by that family that you, Bob, and I know so well. And Gene knows now too. These people, who knew this? You know, I mean, I knew a story, but that aside, my grandmother had it embedded in her. It was there. It's in clear sight for everyone to see. But you know, really, when I read the letters, then, and I know that my aunt, your aunt, or great aunt, wherever we are here, Maria Pagamo, the one that we connected on there, Nicola's sister. When you think about where she came from and her husband, who is wealthy too, I read letters from someone who was extremely educated, Tommaso Pagamo, to my grandfather, telling him what a gracious and wonderful man he is. This could only happen in America. No way in hell would my grandmother be able to talk to a Sicilian. Our family owned the land that these people worked on in Naples. And her father thought it. Forget about it. He didn't want nothing to do with my grandfather. They were the salt of the earth and good people, and in the end, every one of the Neapolitans, except Siciliano, all saw my grandfather and my grandfather's family for who they were. And so, you know, we got a foot in this royal camp, and in the pulpit, they worked other people's land. You know, I mean, that was it. I mean, I know what they did. I've got all their records. It's astonishing. And for me to be able to do an update with the information that I have now in this family, I could see how they lived. This cousin that we were talking about, they lived across the street from each other. Generation after generation after generation that lived in the same place as this town. We could go now and we could walk across the street here. We heard this one was picked up when their family died. Oh yeah, they lived across the street. The parents died. The other family. It's you know, they were butchers for 300 years. One family, butchers. Who knew? And guess what? I got to say this, and then I'll shut up. But on the Sicilian side, my grandfather came over here, and he met his father, who died when he was 3 months old. He came to see his father's brother in Rochester. The him and Rose and Conchetta. Conchetta got sent back because she wasn't a pretty one. That's the truth. She was at the bottom of the list. They had a quota. She wasn't pretty. Sent her home. She had the same education. Right? A little bit, maybe a little less, like Gene says. But honestly, Gene knows because he knows who came over. And that's what happened. I could look at it, and I talked to the genealogist. She said that's exactly what happened. Be happy she got back to Italy. I got ones that went to France. They never got home. They never even made it back to Italy when they were sent home. She has done trees where she found family in France. People got tried, and they never made it back. How she made it back, like Gene said, is nothing but short of a miracle. But the melding of those two families is a very odd thing. It would never be seen, never be happening anywhere. But now that I have this information that has everybody understanding how they really are related, they don't know. I know. They don't know. And I mean, I know where they lived. I know what they did. I know how they contributed to each other. They worked. You know how they lived? One unit. They lived and survived based on what the other did. The parents died. Maria lost the husband. She's no husband. She's sewing her fingers to a bone. You can see the arthritis in her hands. She has a bunch of little kids. A 3-month-old. When her husband died when he was 38 years old. You know, and she takes in these cousins that lived across the street, and she raises them, and they have become. Teresa marries who was also there, and on and on and on and on. But that's the family we knew. Nobody else knows that.
I don't know if you know this, but my great uncle, Ubaldo's brother, Ricardo, he married his first cousin. Her name was Princey, her last name. She passed away and he married her sister. And Aunt Alma and Richard and all, they're all from the second wife, the sister. So, you know, that's a whole crazy story. But I want to ask you, because I don't know, and I don't know if you know, do you know why Tommaso Pergamo and Maria Piramalo came to the United States?
I'm going to tell you what I think, and what I check out, and I'm feeling better and better about it the more I read history. I still don't have the documents yet, but we know what we need to go for. But I got to get it from the archives. You know, it's the stuff on film. I can't get it online. There's one thing about the first cousin. This thing with the people who don't do trees don't know this stuff happens all the time. Conchetta, she married a cousin's husband. The cousin died. He was free. Okay, marry her. That was what happened. There was no love law. I mean, she got off the boat. She was ready. He was there. They were married. They were cousins.
But why did Maria and Tommaso come? Why do you think they came to America?
He was a landowner. In fact, she's trying to find this for me now. If I can get a hold of, I can get a hold of census records, tax records, and stuff like this. That's what I'm looking for. And she's on it. She's helping me. But we're pretty sure, based on the timing, and I'm also having the rest of that family, which is very small, traced to see what happened to their wealth. They were wealthy landowners in the Neapolitan area, and they had a lot. They're big landowners. I mean, they weren't a big name. I think they came from Greece, Pergamo, think about Turkey. Oh God, I can't think of it. Anyway, never mind. That's all DNA stuff. Doesn't matter. They were wealthy people in that area, and she was one of the bottom children there. So okay, she wasn't important. She could marry somebody who had some money and go up and be good. So when he left was in the 1880s. If you look at Italian history, the South, which was the breadbasket, made all the money for the country. Always a rich country. Then it joined in 1861 or whatever it was, the unification. Well, once the unification they left the South alone pretty well because it had this feudal system that seemed to work. Like the people who own the land really did take care of the people. They did things, like they took care of health. People had a certain right to public land, to food. There was all this kind of stuff that was in place in the South that they didn't have in the North. In the 80s, they started to get. This is why history is so involved. I think involved in getting right to genealogy. Uh, in the 80s, what started to happen was industrialization started in the rest of the world, right? And the Italians wanted to pick up on industrialization. So they went to the South and stripped it of all its money, overtaxing it, trying to push it into anybody who wanted to win needed to try to get into industrialization because and they were all farmers, right? I mean, they were landowners and stuff like that. That didn't work. So I think that caused a huge movement of people of our family's class from the South here is when that stuff started to happen. Some families were able to hold on, some were not. One of our family members still remained there. That brother may have consolidated property. I believe because we were told several stories and we're checking on it. One, Tommaso, I was told he owned a shoe factory. My aunt said a glove factory. You look at my grandmother, you look at her gloves and her shoes, he made both. No question about it. I mean, the old pictures, that's what he did. This was probably his shot at industrialization. He sold some of his land. He was a landowner on all the records I read. And all of a sudden, he showed all the stories I hear, shoe and glove. Timing wise, it would make sense. And if he's not that kind of a businessman. He wasn't young in his day. That it was probably a risky proposition, and I suspect that's what, because his son was in the University of Naples at the time. He pulled the one out that's buried in Potter's Field. He was in the University of Naples at the time, so we know they had money. And then and all of a sudden he shows up in the United States with another one of his other brother's sons, and another brother stays here. So something dynamic business wise blew, and he still had money though, because he managed to live in like not such a bad place on 14th, not so bad. They didn't live in like the slums, the lowest part of Manhattan. It wasn't all that bad. And he look at the way my grandmother was dressed. Gene, that didn't come from her family. That came from.
So that may explain, if he was in the textile industry, why my grandfather and his brother wound up with the embroidery business.
That could be exactly how all that came about. See, and you came a little bit earlier. I think that something. Look, if you dig into the history and you look at the timing, you'll probably see that there's something like this that inspired them to come over here. Because think about where they lived, who they were. What the hell would they leave for? I mean, really, even if you're the low end of the stick, like Maria was, you're still in a good spot. Look at where they lived. Oh my God. I mean, she wrote her name as Countess when her babies were born. It was Countess Maria. That genealogist I work with would not, but she just, you blow my mind. You are the first person that story's been true with. The first person from Italy I've worked in my career that it's true with. Because everybody thinks because they got a little crest.
I know. I hear that too.
Yeah, huh? You do. It's true.
I hear that all the time. So Gene, I want to ask you one more thing. When you were growing up, and Linda alluded to it a little bit, and so for the people listening who do not know, you mentioned Emily, who is named after her grandmother, Amelia, and the close ties there. So Amelia was my godmother, and I called him Uncle Connie Costanzo. He was my godfather, and to your point, they were both wonderful people. I used to vacation there in Whitestone during the summer. That was my vacation when I was 8. I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I had a great gig until Susan came along as the first grandchild and spoiled it for me. But my grandmother, what I remember of her was also a very stately kind of woman. So, what do you remember about Nancy and Aunt Emily and all those people?
I would agree completely that the aristocracy, for all of its potential pompousness and entitlement, did bestow on those who were part of it an air of dignity and grace. And they carried themselves accordingly, not to be above, it was just who they were. And they were really good in that regard. My Linda's point earlier about, you can tell my grandmother in other photos. My grandmother was the Neapolitan version of the Mona Lisa. Her smile was the same as Da Vinci's masterpiece. It never changed in any photo you see. It's the same. And it wasn't stoic. It was just a style and how she wished to be perceived and how she carried herself. So did Emily. Emily was beautiful. I remember being struck by her beauty in the day. She was a lovely lady and always very nice. They all were. Every one of them. Even Steve and his wife from Michigan. Again on the Sicilian side, Petix side. Uh, Fairly well-to-do folks. They had a lot of claim to fame in Michigan and so on. Very humble, but carried themselves with grace and dignity, and were very generous to young kids like myself. I always felt as if I was part of something, like I said earlier, and thought about, not dismissed, not given the brush because I was only 3.5 foot high. None of that. And Emily was right, and Connie. I remember Connie too. Big man, very big man. Gentle as he was big. Similar to my father in certain respects, that he was very respectful and very forthcoming and very nice to youngsters. My father was very good with the little folk. Very nice people. Nancy, I did not know. Uh, I know she was in my mother's wedding party, but I didn't know her at all, to my knowledge. Louise, I knew very well because we would see each other with some regularity before she was literally a neighbor. Emily's daughter. We would see each other and do various family little exchanges, and you always kind of knew when somebody like Emily was coming to visit the house in Flushing, because we'd go up to the first floor on the pink carpet, and that level of house was reserved only for the high end dignitaries or what have you, when somebody kind of special was coming. Otherwise, everything else took place in the basement, which is where I think all, at least New York Italians, dwell. We're all subterranean, and everything takes place below ground. But when you went up to the first floor with the fancy furniture and my grandmother's prized pink carpet, you couldn't walk on that carpet. You knew somebody special was coming around, and Emily was one of those specials. But she was always, always impeccable and delightfully warm. Yeah, but anyway, there were all kinds of, what they end up being in some way is, first of all, they're all very loved by Linda and I, and they have enriched both of us in ways that are priceless and cannot even be enumerated accurately. It's just a thing. It really is, and I think both of us have the same mindset that whatever we have, that we don't deserve because it was us. It was just serendipitous fate that we happened to show up in the pecking order where we did, and in the proximity as to where we were. Okay, so purely, but for the grace of God, go I, or what have you. However, we both feel an equal duty, even responsibility. One, to share that. Two, to create a bridge, a linkage, not just with our current peers when we come to this ripe age, and Linda and I are both, a little past prime here, But to give it back, yeah, you too, I know, yeah, and to give it back, in particular for the generations that are behind us, the ones that are either here already or the ones that haven't even been conceived yet, which is why, and Linda alluded to it, there's a cookbook. Simple thing. A cookbook. Big deal. It is a big deal. We were going to have a centennial celebration last June, and we had to postpone it because of obvious reasons with virus slugs. Okay, and that was going to be the 100th anniversary of the Sicilian trio, two sisters and a brother, coming from Seta de Falco, which like I said, I've been to. There's, if you blink twice, you're through it. That kind of thing. And it's right in the central part of Sicily where there's not much more than a rock and a boat. It's pretty tough over there. And they took care of that, and they came, and the courage involved, the foresight, the discipline, the fearlessness, and dealing with uncertainty beyond uncertainty, they showed up anyway. And the poor thing, like I said, got sent back. I have a very tender place in my heart for Conchetta because of her struggles. At any rate, we want to give something back. We had the centennial planned. It was going to be a glorious time. Linda had arranged it all in Little Italy, of course, in a restaurant down there that my Uncle Peter was extremely fond of. We had to postpone it. Okay. So what did we do instead? We said, okay, well, we can't do this. Well, what are we going to do? And Linda's brainchild was, let's make a cookbook. Let's do something to connect us all. Let's make something that you can put something someplace that says, you know what, even if we can't get together now, and we hope to do that in future if they allow, but let's create that and do it accordingly so that we all have something that says we're a we. And here's why. Because the food is love. Okay, that's how it worked there. My grandmother, if you came into her basement on a Tuesday and she wasn't expecting you, guess what? You were not going to leave hungry. Didn't matter. Didn't matter. And it was always that kind of thing and that kind of thing. So plus, those recipes were all secretive. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. I mean, she would show people like Linda's mom and Peter's wife Mary and a few folks here and there. She'd show them a little bit, the in-laws more or less, a little bit, but she'd always kind of leave a little something out. Like how much salt, what salt. She had the top of the salt box cut off. She'd go in there with a fistful. That was her little bit of salt. Anyway, so we took the secrets and we put them into, something that's now available, shared. Our cousin Lori was integral in this part because she was kind of the structural disciplinarian of making it actually a user-friendly and reliable recipe cookbook. Whereas Linda and I can talk till the cows come home, but when it comes to the detail, Lori was the detail person that made it a reality. Our cousin Rick brought in his side as the firstborn on the Speziale side to weigh in with his input and his family, and so we brought the families that were very close, Aunt Rose and her side and Rick, and we brought it together. And Linda and Lori did yeoman's work to make something really extraordinary. And recipes from the generation behind us are included with photos and stories, little stories, little this, little that. So it's a thing that it's an heirloom waiting to be utilized accordingly. So it's that. So we are really blessed by the people who came before us. I am surrounded in any room in my own home, as I am right now, by things that have come from family on either my dad's side or my mom's side all the time. I have many things that my grandfather, the blacksmith, made: his shields, his swords, his axes, his whatever. I have a wrought iron chase lounge that he built for my mother because she was ill and needed a place to sit. And my Uncle Peter thought of it on his deathbed. On his deathbed. Unbelievable. to inform me that he had taken it and had it refurbished and was giving it to me as a Christmas gift. This was in November, for that Christmas, and he knew he wasn't going to be here. So that I could take it to my home in Maine and use it there. And when my mother came to visit, my mother's been gone 44 years, she would have a place to sit on his deathbed. I went to say goodbye to the man, and he shows me a picture on his phone and gives me this spiel. Who does this? Who does this? Who does this? Unbelievable. I went to Maine that Thanksgiving, and I took a picture and I texted it to him, and I said, you know what? Here we are in Maine, and this chair is beautiful, but there's room for two. Meaning you too, Uncle. You come sit here too. They're beautiful, wonderful, generous, loving people from humble roots or aristocracy, but they all come together and they provide such a rich texture for Linda and I to draw from and to become whatever we're capable of in our own way, in our own potentials. And my cousin is extraordinary in everything she does in this regard, tirelessly and beautifully. And I kind of come along for the ride.
I think I'm along for the ride too. So two things. The first one is, with respect to the reunion, the Italian American Museum in New York City is opening up Columbus Day next year. I have a special in. I have a special in with the founder because I interviewed him. So maybe we could all meet there in next October. A little bit late, but maybe we catch it anyway. And about the cookbook, for people listening, it is an amazing cookbook. And Linda, just to ask you, I know this was a second, third, and fourth job for you and your cousin, and great recipes and great photos. And where can people find this book if they want to purchase it?
Let us know. I don't know how we would do such a thing, but it's on Shutterfly. And I mean, that it's simply there. And if you wait for when there's a sale like now, there was just one. I mean, they have them pretty regularly, especially around the holidays. They're going to have them. You could get that cookbook. It has 100 pages in it for 100 years, but it's got more than that in recipes for sure. You could get that book without no shipping, $35.
And it's a great Christmas gift.
It is, and there's sale. And if you put it out there, I'll write something about the sales. I don't know if it's still going on. Let me look, because just wait for when that happens, and then you can order. I'm giving them. I was telling my cousin that's what I've done. I bought a bunch of them, and I'm giving them this Christmas gift. I want to say one thing about. Let me just say one thing about. I wanted to say something about Steve Petix, because I meant to say before when I said that they came over here and they met up when I got off on Conchetta. They met up with their uncle, right? Their oldest uncle, Stefano, in Vincenzo in Rochester. I mean, he was a sulfur miner. I mean, this is what he did. This is why, I'm kind of interested. I'm interested in how, our people seem to have gotten moved up a notch in what they were doing for a living. When they came here, which was earlier, he was a sulfur miner. All his sons, Stefano, who Gene's talking about from Detroit, they picked up the women's trade. The women taught them how to sew, and they turned it into men's custom suits. They made $1 million using their head. Stefano couldn't write his name. I'll send you a picture of his handwriting. I know what education he had. I'll send you his writing. He couldn't even write his name. He was a sulfur miner all his life. But when they got to the United States, they looked around and went, wait a minute, this is where we're going to make the money. And they're still making it out there. And I wanted to leave on that note. This was using their head. In Italy, a seamstress worker only for women. And Steve was handsome and always in the best tailored coats, and oh, gives me the chills to think about it. And that was because he was willing to take on his mother's trade.
Well, thanks. This has been fantastic, and since we can't meet in person, at least we're able to do it online. And this, you know, it makes me melancholy to think that we didn't know each other 30, 40, 50 years ago, but at least we've reconnected now. So thanks a lot.